Hi everyone, this is Jim. With all the news coverage this week, all the chess news focused on the World Championship match going on in New York, you might have missed the news that Mark Taimanov passed away this week. So Mark Taimanov was one of the real legends of chess, and I wanted to do this brief tribute to him. He was born in Leningrad, or no, he was born in the Ukraine, actually, in 1926. And then he moved to Leningrad when he was 6 months old. So he grew up in Leningrad, which is today known as St. Petersburg. His mom was a piano teacher, and she taught him to play the piano, and he actually became a concert pianist as well as a international grandmaster. So interesting dual career there. He was a really strong chess player. From 1950 to 1956, he was among the world's top 10 players, and he was well known as an opening theoretician, and he's written a couple of books about the opening. And of course, he has the Taimanov variation of the Sicilian named after him, and there are variations in other openings as well named after him. But the Taimanov Sicilian is the most known, the variation that he's most known for. He was a participant in the candidates tournament in Zurich 1953, a famous tournament that was annotated by David Bronstein. And in fact, I did a video series on this channel about that tournament, and well, I'll include a link to it. There's in that playlist, I covered the tournament in a round-by-round fashion. So there's 30 games in that playlist, and 8 of them feature Mark Taimanov. He didn't win all 8, of course. He finished in the middle of that tournament, so there's some wins and some losses, but some good examples of Taimanov's play. If you want to take a look at that, I'll put a link to it in this video. He was a USSR champion once. There was twice where he was tied after the initial round. They kind of did it in stages where there would be a big tournament and see who came in first. And he came in tied for first. In 1952, he tied for first with Mikhail Botvinnik, and then he lost the playoff to Botvinnik. And then in 1956, he finished first, tied with Yuri Averbach and Boris Spassky. And then in the playoff, he won that. So in 1956, he was the USSR champion. Oh, by the way, from the 1953 tournament that he played in Zurich, he was one of the 2 remaining players that were still alive today who played in that tournament. So that just leaves Yuri Averbach. Yuri Averbach is 94 years old and is now the sole survivor of all the players who played in that famous 1953 tournament. The tournament, though, that Taimanov played in many tournaments over the years, and over a period of about 25 years, he was in the top 20 in the world. But the tournament he's most famous for is probably, or the match he's most famous for is probably his loss to Bobby Fischer in 1971, where he lost 6-0, and so that was a pretty embarrassing match in some respects. In fact, the Soviet government got mad at him, and they took away his salary, and they took away his travel privileges, at least for a while. Fischer went on to also defeat Bent Larsen by a score of 6-0, and then defeated Tigran Petrosian by 6.5 to 2.5 before playing in the World Championship match against Spassky. So I guess they reconsidered and let Taimanov have his travel privileges and his salary back. Anyway, Taimanov thought this was a great match, and he actually wrote a book about it called How I Became Fischer's Victim. So interesting that he would choose to write a book about it. He also wrote books about, he wrote an autobiographical collection of his best games, and he wrote books about the openings, his research in the openings. As a musician, he formed a piano duo with his first wife, and the recordings are included in the series Great Pianists of the 20th Century. So anyway, he just passed away in St. Petersburg on November 28th, so just a couple of days ago. And so I thought I would show one of his games from the early part of his career. This is a key position taken from the game. So if you've been subliminally studying this, we're going to get back to this position. But let's go back and show this game from the beginning. His opponent here is Georgy Lisitsin, and this was played in Leningrad in 1949. Georgy was an international master, so a good player, not maybe world class like a grandmaster like Taimanov, but he was several times champion of the Leningrad, where there was really strong chess group there, so he's no slouch either. So Taimanov has the white pieces, starts off with d4. Lisitsin goes d5. And I'm going to go fairly quickly up to that critical point. This is there's some interesting moments along the way. I'll point them out. Starts off as a queen's gambit, declined. Taimanov goes with knight f3, the second choice here, and Lisitsin goes with c6. So he's setting up a semi-Slav, and Taimanov plays an interesting move, queen c2, a little bit offbeat, but the queen is well prepared on this file. After the pawns have been set up like this, there's the c file might get opened, and we'll see that happening later in the game. Knight to d7. So this is a rare continuation. Normally knight to f6 is the way this is played, but black doesn't do anything wrong in this phase of the game. He's just playing, little offbeat moves, maybe trying to get Taimanov out of his familiar territory. But this is a pretty standard looking setup anyway, even though it's actually out of the opening book at this point. And f5. So that's Lisitsin's idea here. He's got a stonewall, a Dutch stonewall defense against the queen's gambit. White castles here, knight to f6. And now at this point, Taimanov decides to open up the c file. So he takes, and black takes back with the c pawn. That's the idea. One of the ideas with the stonewall is to keep this solid pawn formation here, make it tough to break down. Knight to c3, a6, keeping control of the b5 square, bishop to f4. So this is an interesting decision. This allows black to take and double the pawns over here, which black does. Let's go ahead and put that on the board and then talk about why Taimanov might think this is a good idea. Let's talk about the negatives first. The negatives are that the king side has been weakened. There's now an open line to the king. And there's doubled pawns here, which may become weak in the endgame. So it could be a concern later on. But, let's contrast this with the positives. The main positive here is that it creates a solid grip on the center, so these pawns can't move easily. And Taimanov is free to attack over here on the queen side, which is his plan. If you look at black's plan here, there's no easy route for his pieces to get over to the king side. So this weakening of the king side that's happened as a result of this exchange is not easy for black to exploit. So anyway, it's a good trade here. White has still got that slight opening edge. Black is still fine as well, so black hasn't really made any mistakes yet. So knight a4, the knight is headed for this c5 square. Knight b6. Knight to c5. Now this next move is the first slight mistake and maybe gives black somewhat of a disadvantage. Up to this point, black really has quite a playable game, and knight to c4 is probably the best way to continue and to keep things under control. Give black a playable game. For example, if this knight were kicked away, if white, it's a good square, and the knight can just sit there and it controls some of these light squares. Maybe it'll trade itself off for a knight on e5, for example. But if it gets kicked back, it also has this good square on d6, and it can look forward to this square on e4 as a potential target. So all this would be fine. Instead, in this position, instead of playing knight to c4, he played queen to d6. So he has some interesting maneuvers in mind. I don't know, I haven't seen enough of Lisitsin's games to know if this is kind of typical of his play or not, but they seem somewhat contrived, the maneuvers that he goes through next. And looking at it with the chess engine, it seems that white is just a little bit better here, or noticeably better, starting with this move, queen d6. So anyway, knight to e5, very logical play from Taimanov. Rook to b8, and we'll see the point of this move in a second. White plays a4, and the knight goes to a8. So that's what I mean by being somewhat contrived. It seems like Lisitsin has moved his rook out of the way so that his knight can come back to the a8 square, Maybe his plan is to reroute the knight through the c7 square to some other destination over on the king side. It's not clear. Taimanov continues with a5, so the knight's not coming back to b6, so his only outlet is now the c7 square. Bishop to d7 is played. And taking a look, making space for a rook to come over to the c file. Rook f to c1. Taimanov gets his rook to the c file first. Bishop to b5. Well, this is a good square for the bishop. Looks at this e-pawn here, which, the queen doesn't want to be tied down defending. So Taimanov plays e3. Now this rook comes over to the c file. He's got the rook opposite the queen with this potential pin, with a pin on the knight, which maybe he can find some way to exploit. So Taimanov plays an interesting move, rook to a3. So as a way of bringing the rook over to the c file, shielding the queen so as to unpin the knight. And Lisitsin at this point plays rook to c7. So I guess his idea is to double his rooks on the c file, but he's completely marooned this knight over here. This knight has no squares to go to. And this will be a theme in the game. Rook to c3, continuing very logically. Queen goes to e7, a little bit of shuffling back here. Bishop to f1. Taimanov wants to trade off this bishop and maybe take advantage of the b file here as well as the c file. There's no good way to avoid the trade here. I guess Lisitsin doesn't want to keep retreating. There are no other good squares for that bishop, so he takes this way rather than allowing white to take. And then he plays rook b to c8. So he's admitting this knight is going to be stranded for a while, but he's got these rooks on the c file. Looks like the position is under control. Queen to b3 is played by Taimanov, taking a look at the b pawn here, which at the moment seems very securely defended by queen and rook. And now knight to e8. So probably some maneuver with this knight. Maybe the knight is coming to d6 over here, or maybe he's just lending some extra support to the c7 rook there in case things suddenly open up. It could be that he has an idea of liberating his position with pawn to b6, and that would actually give this knight a square to go to. Although at this moment it would be a sacrifice, so that would probably not be good just yet. Anyway, it's white's turn to move, and if you want to see if you can think like a grandmaster, you might want to pause the video here and see if you can spot the best move. And there's a tactic in this position, so see if you can spot the move. Okay, this is the kind of tactic that I would have real trouble finding in a game. So if you didn't see anything at first glance, I don't blame you. The move that Taimanov played was knight takes b7. And even if I had thought about this move, I probably would have ruled it out. So let's see how it goes. Rook takes knight is really the only way to challenge it. I mean, the exchanges on the c file don't gain any material, and black is just down a pawn, so that doesn't help. So really the only way to deal with this sacrifice is to accept it. And now it's white's turn to move, and let's see, the queen is under attack, and white is down a pawn, so he's got to keep taking. If he takes the rook here, then he will lose the queen, so the only way to continue is to take here, and then the queen takes back, and then he can grab the rook. And so I might have been able to see this far. What's happened here is that white has given up a queen and a knight and has won 2 rooks. So it looks like white is just down some material. But because the 2 rooks are roughly equal to the queen, only got a pawn in addition to the 2 rooks. But black has 2 knights. But what you have to notice also is that these knights are not well placed. This is almost a fork. Not quite, because this knight is defended by the queen. This knight is loose though, and the queen can't move anywhere to defend both knights, right? If the queen went to this square, it would defend both knights. This knight can't move because it's pinned. So if we back up to the position where the tactic was played, right here, where Taimanov chose to play knight takes b7. I'm assuming he calculated at least that far ahead. So you had to see knight takes, rook takes, queen takes rook, queen takes queen, rook takes rook. And then notice that you've got a strong presence on the c file, and you've got pressure against these knights, and you have to decide that that is worth the sacrifice. Or perhaps he even calculated more concretely, because if you were to continue that calculation from this point, there's actually a forced win of material going forward from there, which is kind of amazing. So it'd be interesting to know, how these grandmasters think. Did he really calculate all the way through to where he was ahead in material, or did he just calculate up to that position and thought that he had enough compensation for the knight? I don't know. But, I would have calculated ahead that far, I guess. Noticed I was down material, not been able to notice the how much compensation I had, and probably would have given up on the idea right there. Anyway, knight takes b7, if I had thought about it at all. So rook takes, queen takes, queen takes, rook takes rook. So here we are in this position, and the knight's hanging and it's pinned, and the queen can't defend it, so the king has to defend it. So the king comes over here to f8, and that's actually the only move, because the knight's controlling the f7 square. So, considering it's an only move, it's possible this could have been calculated. And one more move you have to see here. So see if you can spot the next move for white, another clever tactical move. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. Pause the video if you want time to think about it. The move that Taimanov played is rook to b8. And of course I went what when I saw that at first, but well, if you look at it for a second, you see that knight, or that rook is defended by a knight fork. So queen takes rook is not playable. You just lose the queen for the rook, and then white is up material. So where can the queen go? And also notice that this knight is hanging in lots of cases. So how many squares does the queen have that defend the knight? If the queen goes here, well, of course the white's knight covers that square. And there's one really clever line. The other square the queen could go to that defends that knight is a7. And here's a nice tactic. Take the knight, king takes, come in with check, and now notice the knight is covering these two squares, so the king only has one move. And then knight to c6 check, and once again you've got that fork of the king and the queen. Pretty neat. So anyway, after rook to b8, the queen doesn't have any way to save that knight. Queen to e7 was played. Cancel that. Yes, yeah, not e7. The knight's there. Queen to cancel that. Queen to e7, not d7. So getting the queen away from trouble, but giving up the knight. So he takes, and this game is really lost at this point. But well, Georgi keeps playing on, so let's go through the rest of it. Plays g6 here. Maybe he's hoping to get some kind of fortress over here, but it's a tough call. This rook comes. Oh no, rook c to c8. He doubles his rook on the back rank. King goes to g7. I didn't look at this in any detail, but I guess there was no good way to save the knight. But like I said, the game was already over. Queen goes to c7. Cancel that. Queen to c7. He plays rook e back to c8, chasing the queen. Queen goes to b7 now. Plays rook a to b8, chasing the queen all the way to a7. Rook to h8, threatening to come over here and maybe mate the king, bring the other rook in next. Queen goes back to e7. The rook comes in with check. The king goes to h6, and now there's a nice move here. We're getting close to the finish. I think it's a forced mate from this point. So if you want to see if you can find some clever moves in this position. It's a nice one to pause the video and look for how you would continue. Taimanov played the nice move. Rook takes g6, check. So this rook is defended by the knight, so the king can't take it, and this pawn is pinned, so the pawn can't take it. So that rook is perfectly safe there. The king goes to h5, and now there's a little bit of maneuvering to set up a mating net. He starts with rook to g3. He's going to bring a rook over to the g file and this rook here to mate. And like that, the king comes forward to kind of slow down that plan. Knight to f3 check drives the king back. Now this rook comes to the g file, and the mate threat of rook to h3 there is unstoppable. The queen can sacrifice, but the mate will happen sooner or later. So Georgi finally resigned at this point. Anyway, a very nice game and a good example of Taimanov's play. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you later.